You live with me for free. Half of your pension will cover your rent, my son exclaimed, and his wife nodded silently as if it were a normal arrangement. I smiled, swallowing the bitterness of betrayal. But when I got up from the table, everything changed. The justice they didn't expect began to destroy their world. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. I poured coffee into my mug and offered refills to Douglas and Leona across the dining room table. Sunday lunch had left the table cluttered with plates, the spring afternoon light coming through the windows at 2847 Maple Street in soft bands. I felt good that day, optimistic even. I wanted you both to know first, I said, settling back into my chair. I'm retiring next month. Pension comes to $2,400 monthly. Not much, but enough. Douglas glanced at Leona. Something passed between them that made my coffee suddenly taste different. Leona set down her fork with precision. That's actually perfect timing. We've been meaning to discuss your rent situation. Starting April, you'll pay $1,200 monthly. The words hung there like smoke. I looked at my son, waiting for him to correct her, to laugh it off. He studied his plate instead, pushing around the last of his food. Rent? I kept my voice level. I'm family. This is our house, Sylvester. Leona emphasized the word like I might be hard of hearing. You live here. You pay rent. That's how it works everywhere. She slid a printed spreadsheet across the table toward me. The paper was crisp, the columns neat. She'd prepared this, planned it. Douglas finally spoke, still not meeting my eyes. Dad, you have to understand. We have expenses. Mortgage, bills. It's only fair you contribute. I looked at the spreadsheet. Room rental, utilities allocation, shared space usage, food costs. The numbers were itemized like a restaurant menu. $1,200. Half of everything I'd earned over 43 years of engineering work, calculated down to the cent. When you mentioned the pension amount, Leona continued, her voice businesslike and cold, we realized you could afford market rate. Your room, utilities, shared spaces, food. $1,200 is actually generous for this neighborhood. I stood slowly, pushed my chair back without force. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor I'd helped Douglas refinish 5 years ago. I didn't slam anything, didn't raise my voice, just looked at them both, my son avoiding my gaze, his wife watching me with the expression of someone concluding a successful business transaction. Interesting, I said. The word came out flat, almost curious. Very interesting indeed. I walked toward the stairs, my footsteps measured and deliberate. Behind me, Leona called out, We'll need first payment April 1st. That's 3 weeks. I didn't turn around. In my bedroom, I locked the door and moved to the closet. The cardboard box sat on the top shelf, where it had been for 15 years, labeled in my own handwriting. House Documents, 2010. My hands were steady as I pulled it down and carried it to the bed. The papers spread across the comforter like evidence at a crime scene. Cashier's check for $340,000. My signature at the bottom. Closing documents from March 2010. My name listed as buyer. Douglas Bell listed as title holder. The deed transfer paperwork. My handwritten note on yellow legal pad paper, dated the day of closing. For my son's future. So he starts ahead of where I did. I'd been 42 years my career as a structural engineer, calculating load-bearing capacity and stress points, understanding exactly how much weight a foundation could hold before it cracked. I'd wanted Douglas to build his life on solid ground. Instead, I'd built him a weapon. The mortgage they claimed to struggle with didn't exist. I'd paid cash. The bills they needed help covering were for a house that cost them nothing. And now they wanted half my pension for the privilege of sleeping in a bedroom I'd purchased with my own money, in a house I'd handed to my son as a gift because I believed a father should help his children succeed. I sat on the edge of the bed, the original check in my hand. $340,000. 15 years ago, that was nearly everything I had saved. I'd lived in a studio apartment for 2 years afterward, rebuilding my savings, telling myself it was worth it because Douglas would have security. From downstairs, I heard laughter. Douglas and Leona, voices carrying up through the vents. Something was funny. Something had amused them. I looked at the papers spread before me, each one a fragment of proof. My signature, my money, My name on every document that mattered except the one that mattered most, the title itself. I'd spent 4 decades reading blueprints, identifying structural weaknesses, understanding exactly where pressure needed to be applied to bring down what needed to fall. I'd been trained to see what others missed, to calculate the invisible forces that held things together or tore them apart. They'd made a miscalculation, a critical one. I gathered the documents carefully, stacking them in chronological order, the check on top, showing the full amount, then the purchase agreement, the closing statement, the title transfer, each piece of paper a load-bearing wall in the structure of their mistake. Downstairs, the laughter continued. I listened to it the way I'd once listened to the sound of metal under stress, detecting the frequency that signaled approaching failure. I placed the stack of documents back in the box, but I didn't return it to the closet. Instead, I set it on my desk, within reach. I would need these soon. Very soon. The pension letter from the state was in my nightstand drawer. I pulled it out and read it again, though I'd memorized every word. $2,400 monthly beginning April 1st. 3 weeks away. 3 weeks until they expected me to hand over half. I folded the letter and placed it with the house documents. Then I sat in the chair by the window, watching the afternoon light fade into evening. My room grew darker. I didn't turn on the lamp. They hadn't asked me to leave. They'd done something worse. They'd decided to extract payment for a gift, to monetize generosity, to convert love into a monthly transaction. They'd calculated my worth in dollars and found it conveniently equal to half my income. I sat in the gathering darkness, holding a piece of paper worth more than my son's integrity. Downstairs, they were laughing. I didn't go down for dinner that night. I had work to do. The next morning, I found a printed document beside my coffee mug. House Rules and Expectations was centered at the top in bold font. Quiet hours between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Kitchen access schedule. Leona had morning priority. I could use it after 8:30. Shared space usage guidelines. The television in the living room was theirs. I should watch programs in my room. Leona appeared in the doorway, already dressed for her job at the medical billing office. "Just some structure," she said. "Makes everything clearer for everyone." I picked up the paper, folded it once, and slipped it into my shirt pocket. "Clear is good," I said. She left without another word. Douglas came down 10 minutes later, grabbed a travel mug, and headed out. Neither of them asked if I'd slept well or needed anything. The house felt different now, not like a home, but like a property with tenants and landlords. I pulled the notebook from my pocket, one I'd bought at the drugstore the previous evening. Small, spiral-bound, fits in a hand. I wrote the date, then House Rules document presented, kitchen access restricted, shared spaces redefined as theirs. No emotion in the notes, just facts, times, quotes. On Tuesday, I came downstairs to find Leona photographing the inside of the refrigerator with her phone. She moved items, angling for better shots. Her expression concentrated. "Documentation purposes," she said when she noticed me watching. "I see," I said. "Should I expect an itemized receipt?" "Maybe. We'll see how April goes." I noted that, too. Time, date, her exact words. The refrigerator inventory, the implication that my food consumption was being measured against some standard she'd established. That afternoon, while they were both at work, I walked 3 blocks to a different bank than the one we'd always used. The branch manager was young, professional, eager to help. I opened a new account, checking and savings. Then I transferred $87,000 from my old savings account, the one Douglas and Leona knew existed, because I'd mentioned it last Christmas, when Douglas had been worried about car repairs. "Everything all right, Mr. Bell?" the branch manager asked as she processed the transfer. "Just organizing finances for retirement," I said, smiling. "Want everything simplified?" She handed me temporary checks and a debit card. I rented a safety deposit box while I was there. Small, but sufficient. Back home, I photographed every document from the house box using my phone. The check, the closing papers, the deed transfer, my handwritten note. I uploaded everything to cloud storage, then drove to my new bank and placed the originals in the safety deposit box. The copies went back into the cardboard box in my room. If anyone looked, they'd see papers. They wouldn't know the originals were locked away beyond their reach. Wednesday evening, I returned to my bedroom after dinner to find it noticeably colder than the rest of the house. The programmable thermostat in the hallway showed 58 degrees, set for my zone during nighttime hours. When I adjusted it back to 68, Douglas appeared within minutes. "Dad, the heat stays at that setting. We can't afford to warm empty rooms all day." "My room isn't empty," I said. "I'm in it." "You know what I mean. During work hours, use a blanket." He walked away before I could respond. I noted the interaction in my book. Thermostat control. Temperature set to 58. Use a blanket quote, attributed directly to Douglas. Over dinner Thursday, I still ate with them, still sat at the same table, observing. Leona mentioned almost casually, "Douglas and I were discussing seniors often prefer first-floor living. Safer, fewer stairs." "I'm 67, not 97, I said. "Of course." Her smile was practiced, the kind you'd give a difficult client. "Just something to think about. Your current room would make an excellent office for Douglas. Home office expansion, you know. Tax deductible." "I'll give it thought," I said, and stood to clear my plate. A lot of thought. That night I sat at my laptop and searched. Oregon property law. Purchased house in someone else's name. Legal rights to property paid for by another person. The search results loaded slowly, but I had time. All the time in the world now. Constructive trust. The term appeared in multiple results. I clicked through to legal forms, statute explanations, case precedents. In Oregon, when someone provides funds for property purchase but title is placed in another person's name, courts could impose a constructive trust, recognizing the funding party's actual ownership despite what the paperwork showed. I took screenshots, wrote down statute numbers, found names of attorneys who'd handled similar cases, real estate disputes, property ownership challenges. 23 attorneys in Portland alone specialized in this exact situation. Friday morning, after Douglas and Leona left for work, I read through everything again. The law was clear. Documentation was key. Proof of payment. Proof that title transfer was intended as temporary or for specific purposes. Written evidence of the relationship between the parties. I had the check. I had the closing documents. I had my handwritten note explaining the gift was for my son's future, not an unconditional transfer of ownership. I had a pattern of behavior, living in the house for 15 years without being charged rent, until the moment I mentioned pension income. Saturday, Douglas suggested we talk about April 1st after breakfast. Leona had printed another spreadsheet, this one showing monthly expenses I'd be responsible for, $1,200 for rent and food. But there were line items for additional services, laundry facilities, garage access, yard space usage. "These aren't included in the base rent," she explained, "but if you want them, we can negotiate rates." I looked at my son. He was scrolling through his phone, not even pretending to pay attention to his wife extracting money from his father, like I was a tenant disputing utility charges. "I'll review this," I said, taking the paper. "Give you an answer soon." Sunday night, late, I sat at my desk with the notebook, the printed spreadsheets, the screenshots of legal statutes, and a list of attorney names with their phone numbers. I'd organized everything by date, by category, by relevance. James Morrison, real estate attorney, property disputes, 20 years experience. His website showed a practice focused specifically on title challenges and ownership conflicts. Reviews praised his thoroughness, his willingness to take cases others considered difficult. His office was downtown on Fifth Avenue. Consultation fee was $200. Phone number listed clearly at the top of the page. I wrote it down in my notebook, underlining it twice. Tomorrow was Monday. Offices opened at 9. I'd call at 9:15 after the morning rush, when someone would have time to listen carefully. I clicked on Morrison's profile picture, a man in his 50s, gray hair, serious expression. His biography mentioned engineering background before law school, structural engineering. Specifically, he'd understand blueprints, he'd understand foundations, he'd understand what happened when you built something and then had it claimed by someone else. I closed the laptop and looked at my phone, the attorney's number glowing on the screen. Tomorrow, I'd make a call that would change everything. I called James Morrison's office first thing that morning. His secretary scheduled me for 2 o'clock. By 9:30, I had my folder organized, documents arranged chronologically, repair receipts bundled separately, my week of notes clipped to the inside cover. I put on a dress shirt and jacket. This wasn't casual business. I was hiring a professional to reclaim what belonged to me. "Going out," I told Douglas as he gathered his things for work. He barely looked up. "Sure, Dad." I took the bus downtown. The shared car would have been faster, but I preferred keeping my movements unremarked. The bus dropped me 3 blocks from the office building on Fifth Avenue, 12 floors up according to the directory in the lobby. The elevator ascended slowly, stopping at various floors. By the time I reached Morrison and Associates, I felt the significance of the moment settling over me like a weight I'd chosen to carry. The reception area was professional, but not ostentatious. James Morrison appeared within minutes of my arrival, mid-50s, gray at the temples, reading glasses hanging from a cord around his neck. He shook my hand firmly. "Mr. Bell, come in." His conference room had windows overlooking the city. He gestured to a chair and sat across from me, pulling a legal pad closer. "Tell me what's happening," he said. I spread the documents across the table. The cashier's check first, $340,000 dated March 2010, made out to Columbia Title Company, my signature at the bottom. James picked it up, studied it through his reading glasses. "This is from your personal account? You can verify the funds originated with you?" "Yes, I worked 42 years as structural engineer, saved specifically to buy a house outright, no mortgage." He set the check down carefully, reached for the closing documents. "And you placed title in your son's name because—" I thought I was helping him establish credit, build equity. I thought I was being a good father. James didn't react to the bitterness in my voice, just made notes, moved to the next document. The deed transfer showing Douglas Bell as sole owner, my name nowhere on the title itself. "That complicates things legally," he said, "but doesn't eliminate your claim. Constructive trust doctrine exists precisely for situations like this." He spent 20 minutes reviewing everything, the purchase paperwork, bank statements from 2010 showing the withdrawal, 15 years of repair receipts, roof replacement, $12,000, HVAC system, $8,500, kitchen renovation, $15,000, all paid by me, all documented with my name on invoices and canceled checks. When he finished, he leaned back and removed his glasses. "What are my chances?" I asked. 60-40 in your favor, maybe 65-35 with this documentation. Oregon courts recognize constructive trusts when someone provides purchase funds, but title goes to another party. Your evidence is strong. You funded the purchase. You maintained the property. You have written records spanning 15 years. But it'll cost time and money. 8,000 retainer. Probably 15 to 20 total before we're done. "When can you file?" He smiled slightly, the expression of someone who appreciated decisive clients. "I'll draft the petition this week. Need to verify a few details with the county recorder's office, confirm title status. We file next week." I wrote him a check for $8,000 from my new bank account. My hand was steady. The account was only 2 weeks old, but James noticed. He was the kind of attorney who noticed everything. "Recent account?" he asked. "Asset protection," I said. "Seemed prudent." "Smart." He signed the retainer agreement and slid my copy across the table. "I'll call you when the petition's ready. Probably Thursday or Friday. Once we file, they'll be served within 48 hours. I took the bus home, arriving before Douglas and Leona finished work, placed the attorney receipt in my locked desk drawer, attended dinner as usual. Douglas cleared his throat halfway through the meal. Leona took over before he could speak. "We've reviewed market rates," she said, producing another printed spreadsheet. "Your rent increases to $1,500 starting May 1st. She slid the paper toward me. Rental listings from websites, comparable rooms in Portland houses, prices ranging from $1,700 to $1,900 monthly. I looked at the spreadsheet. The numbers were highlighted, organized into columns, professional in appearance. "That's a 25% increase," I said. "That's market reality. You're getting a deal, honestly." Douglas added weakly, "Bills keep going up, Dad. We're not making money off you, just covering costs." I stood, picked up my plate. "I understand. May 1st, 1,500. Leona called after me as I left the room. "We'll need it on the 1st, not late in the month like last time." I paused, but didn't turn around. Noted. I hadn't paid April rent, hadn't paid anything, but she was already rewriting history, creating a narrative where I was the delinquent tenant, the burden who needed management. In my room, I heard them downstairs. Their voices carried through the heating vents. "See?" Leona was saying. "He's reasonable. We should have done this months ago." Douglas murmured something I couldn't catch. "By next year, we can probably push it to 2,000. Leona continued. "He's not going anywhere." Where would he go? I opened my notebook, wrote the date, April 6th. Then, attorney retained, James Morrison, $8,000 retainer. Petition files next week. New line, rent increased to $1,500, effective May 1st. L suggests increasing to $2,000 next year. Their voices drifted up, celebrating what they thought was victory. Douglas laughed at something. The sound echoed in the ductwork. I added another entry. Pattern established, incremental demands, confidence growing, long-term exploitation planned. James would file the petition next week, probably Thursday. They'd be served by Saturday. Let them celebrate while they could. James said he needed corroborating witnesses. I knew exactly where to start. Patricia Henderson's house mirrored mine in layout. Same builder, same year, same floor plan, reversed. She'd lived there since 2010. Moved in 2 months before I bought my place. We'd been neighbors for 15 years, friendly without being intrusive. She knew my habits. She'd watched me maintain the property, hire contractors, handle every repair personally. I walked across the lawn between our houses mid-morning on a Wednesday. Douglas and Leona were at work. The April sun was warm, the grass still damp from overnight rain. Patricia saw me through her window and opened the door before I could knock. "Sylvester," she said, concern immediate in her voice. "I've been meaning to check on you. Is everything all right?" "I've noticed." Tension. "Do you have a few minutes?" I asked. "Of course. Come in." Her kitchen smelled like coffee. She poured 2 cups without asking, set them on the table. We sat across from each other, the morning light slanting through her window. "How long have you lived here?" I asked. 15 years this June. Moved in 2 months before you bought your place." She studied my face. "What's wrong?" "You remember me buying the house?" "Absolutely." Her voice was firm, no hesitation. "You were so proud. Told me you'd saved your whole career for it. Paid cash, no mortgage. Your son visited sometimes, but this was always your house. Everyone knew that." I pulled out my notepad and a pen. "Would you be willing to write that down? Sign it?" Understanding dawned across her features. "Are they claiming it's theirs? After everything you've done?" She reached for the pen. "Give me paper. I'll write every detail I remember." She spent 20 minutes writing, her handwriting neat and deliberate. She dated it, signed it, pushed it across the table to me. "I'm happy to testify," she said firmly. "What they're doing isn't right. I've watched you repair that roof, replace the furnace, renovate the kitchen. Douglas shows up occasionally. His wife barely acknowledges neighbors. That house is yours, Sylvester. Everyone on this street knows it." I photographed her statement with my phone, thanked her, stored the original in my folder. That afternoon, I met Michael Torres at a coffee shop downtown. Licensed appraiser, 30 years experience, according to his website. I'd called him that morning. "What's prompting the appraisal?" he asked, pulling out his tablet. "Sale, refinance, estate planning?" "Legal matter. I need official valuation." "Understood. No judgment, just professional efficiency. I'll need access to all rooms, including basement and attic. When works for you?" "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. The other occupants will be at work." "Other occupants?" "It's complicated," I said. "That's why I need the appraisal." Michael arrived precisely at 10 the next morning. Spent 2 hours measuring rooms, photographing upgrades, noting maintenance quality. I stayed in the background, didn't influence his evaluation. He was thorough, professional, exactly what I needed. 3 days later, the appraisal report arrived by email. Current market value, $520,000. The house had appreciated $180,000 since I bought it. Investment I'd funded entirely, maintained personally, improved systematically. I forwarded the report to James Morrison, then turned to other research. That evening I searched county property records online. Public information accessible to anyone. I entered the address for 2847 Maple Street and waited for the results to load. Purchase history appeared first. Original purchase, March 2010. Price $340,000. No mortgage recorded. Free and clear, exactly as I'd paid for it. Then, lower on the screen, a second entry. Home equity line of credit, $80,000. Open March 2024. Lender, Pacific Northwest Bank. I stared at that entry for a long time. Douglas had borrowed against the house. Borrowed $80,000 using equity I'd created. Without telling me. Without asking permission. I clicked deeper into courthouse records, searching for any related filings. Found one dated 6 weeks ago. Notice of default. Pacific Northwest Bank versus Douglas Bell. Borrower 3 payments delinquent on home equity line of credit. Monthly payment $2,400. Total arrears $7,200. Borrower has 90 days from notice to cure default or property subject to foreclosure proceedings. The calculation was simple. They were demanding $1,500 monthly from me while owing the bank $7,200 in missed payments. Monthly HELOC payment $2,400, exactly matching my pension amount. They weren't greedy, they were desperate, drowning, and trying to use me as a life raft. I sat back from the laptop, processing. Douglas had taken an $80,000 loan 14 months ago, couldn't maintain the payments. Faced foreclosure within 90 days unless he caught up the arrears and resumed paying $2,400 monthly. That's why the rent demand came exactly when it did. That's why they'd calculated $1,200 so precisely. Half my pension. That's why Leona had increased it to $1,500 this week. They needed more. Faster. They'd gambled with a house they didn't buy, using equity they didn't create, and now they needed me to bail them out. I composed an email to James Morrison. Subject line, additional evidence, urgent. Attach the appraisal report, screenshot of the HELOC, screenshot of the foreclosure notice. Body text, property currently valued at $520,000. Title holder took $80,000 HELOC in March 2024 without my knowledge. Currently in default, $7,200 in arrears, facing foreclosure. This explains their sudden demand for rent payments. Please call when convenient. That evening, Douglas passed me in the hallway. Dad, did someone come by today? Neighbor mentioned seeing a car. Property appraiser, I said calmly. For my records. Appraiser? Why? Personal business. I continued to my room, closed the door. Heard Leona's voice from the kitchen, suspicious. What does he need an appraisal for? Douglas responded, uneasy. I don't know. Maybe insurance? At 11 that night, I opened my laptop one final time. The email to James sat in my drafts folder, all attachments verified. I reviewed it once more, then hit send. The message whooshed into the night. 4 attachments that transformed the case from property dispute to financial catastrophe. Douglas and Leona weren't just thieves. They were desperate, sinking, trying to pull me under with them. I closed the laptop. James would see this by morning. James called me before 8 the next morning. His voice had a different quality. Sharper, more energized. Sylvester, the evidence package you sent is exceptional. Patricia's statement establishes timeline perfectly. The appraisal shows current value at $520, and that foreclosure notice, that's leverage we couldn't have anticipated. When do you file? I asked. Today. I'm finishing the petition now. They'll be served within 48 hours, probably Thursday. I pulled my notebook closer, wrote down the timeline. What happens after they're served? They have 30 days to respond. They'll hire an attorney, file an answer, maybe counterclaim. Then we begin discovery, depositions, interrogatories, document production, standard litigation process. How long until resolution? 4 to 6 months if they fight it all the way. Could settle earlier if they're smart enough to recognize they're exposed. James paused. One more thing. Given the foreclosure situation, they're financially vulnerable. That usually makes people desperate. Desperate people make bad decisions. Stay alert. 2 days passed. I maintained minimal interaction with Douglas and Leona, ate meals in my room, documented their increasingly hostile glances. The house felt like a battlefield during ceasefire, temporary quiet, masking inevitable violence. Thursday afternoon, the doorbell rang. Douglas answered. I heard voices from my room. Formal, transactional. Then footsteps on the stairs, rapid and heavy. What is this? Douglas appeared in my doorway, papers clutched in his hand. Behind him, Leona's face was pale. I looked up from my book. Legal documents, I'd assume. You sued us? Leona pushed past Douglas. You actually filed a lawsuit? I filed a petition for constructive trust. Yes. Douglas stared at the papers like they might ignite. You can't do this. The house is in my name. It's been 15 years. Then you have nothing to worry about. I returned to my book. Your attorney can explain the process. They left without another word. I heard them downstairs, spreading the documents across the dining table. Their voices carried through the vents, confused, angry, scared. By evening, they'd consulted someone. I knew because they tried cornering me in the kitchen. Dad, Douglas cleared his throat. This lawsuit thing, it's getting out of hand. Can't we sit down, work this out like family? I didn't turn from the stove. We can't, but our attorneys can. You're really doing this? Leona's voice had a harder edge. Suing your own son? I turned then, met her eyes directly. I'm reclaiming property I purchased. The relationship is secondary to the law. Secondary? Douglas's volume rose. I'm your family. Family doesn't charge family 75% of their income for a room they already own. You redefined our relationship. I'm accepting your terms. Then get out. Douglas stepped closer, fists clenched. Leave, tonight. I didn't move. That's illegal eviction. Oregon law requires 30-day written notice minimum, even for family members. Evict me now, and I'll file an additional claim tomorrow. Try me. Leona grabbed Douglas's arm. She was smarter, saw the trap. Let's go. She turned back at the doorway. This isn't over. No, I said. It's just beginning. In my room later, I heard them through the wall. Leona's voice cut sharp with blame. You said the house was ours forever. You said he gave it to you. Douglas, defensive. He did. It's been 15 years. How was I supposed to know he kept documentation? You should have asked. You should have made sure. He's my father. I trusted. Well, your trust just cost us everything. I opened my notebook. May 8th. Defendants served with petition. Confrontation attempted in kitchen. Eviction threatened. Documented verbally. Their panic is showing. Through the wall, Leona's voice came again. We need a real attorney, and we need to fight back. Douglas murmured agreement. I closed the notebook. James had warned me they'd counterattack. Let them try. Every action they took now was visible, documented, submitted to court review. They were fighting in a system that required proof, procedure, patience. I had all three. I had a routine checkup scheduled that Tuesday, just annual physical, blood work, the usual monitoring of a 67-year-old body. I left the house at 1:30, expected to return by 4. The appointment went smoothly. Blood pressure normal, cholesterol acceptable. Doctor pleased with everything. I took the bus home. Parking downtown cost more than transit fare. At the front door, I inserted my key. It wouldn't turn. I tried again, jiggling it. The mechanism felt wrong, different. I examined the lock closely. New hardware, brass instead of steel. They'd changed it. The back door was the same. Fresh lock set. My key useless. I pressed the doorbell, waited, pressed again, holding it longer. Leona's voice came through an intercom I didn't know existed. We're not letting you in. Open the door, I said calmly. I live here. Not anymore. You sued us. That's abandonment. That's not how law works. Open the door. Silence. I pulled out my phone, photographed the front door, the new lock, the doorbell camera mounted above it, also new. Walked around the house, photographing every entry point, each image time-stamped. Douglas's car pulled up while I was at the back door. He got out, saw me, and his jaw set. He walked to the front, unlocked it with a new key, went inside. I followed before he could close it. He blocked the doorway physically. You don't live here anymore. Leave, or I call police. I held up my phone, recording. For the record, you've changed locks, preventing me from accessing my residence and belongings. You're aware this is a legal eviction under Oregon law? Sue me. He almost smiled. Oh, wait, you already did. The door slammed. The deadbolt clicked. I walked to my car, sat inside, called James. They did what? His anger was immediate. Changed the locks while you were at a medical appointment? Complete lockout. I have photos, audio recording of the confrontation. Perfect. I mean, terrible for you. Perfect for the case. Judges absolutely hate landlords who do this. It's one of the most serious violations. He paused. You need temporary housing. Find something. Keep all receipts. They'll be paying for every penny. I'm filing emergency motions first thing tomorrow morning. I drove east on Highway 26 until I found the Sunset Motel. Older property, reasonable rates advertised on a weathered sign. The clerk was a woman in her 50s who noticed I had no luggage. Traveling light? She asked. Temporarily displaced, I said. She didn't pry. I paid cash for 3 nights. Took the key to room 14. The room was basic. Double bed with thin comforter, television bolted to the dresser, bathroom with shower and rust stains around the drain. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. Everything I owned was locked inside a house I'd purchased, inaccessible because my son had decided locks could rewrite ownership. I had my wallet, phone, and the clothes I was wearing. Nothing else. The feeling lasted maybe 30 seconds. Exposure, vulnerability, the sharp edge of understanding that I was 67 and sleeping in a budget motel, while people half my age controlled my possessions. Then anger hardened it into something else. Resolve. Focus. I made a list on my phone of immediate needs. Clothes, toiletries, laptop to communicate with James. All expenses to be documented, all receipts saved. James called the next morning. I filed 2 motions, emergency hearing for wrongful eviction and an order requiring them to return your property immediately. Hearing is scheduled for next Monday. 1 week. What do I need to do? Document everything, every expense, every interaction. They've made a catastrophic error, and I want a complete record when we walk into that courtroom. 3 days later, a process server found me at the motel. How Douglas got the address, I didn't know, and that realization sent a cold thread down my spine. They were tracking me, somehow. The server handed me a thick envelope. Douglas and Leona Bell versus Sylvester Bell, counterclaim. I opened it in my motel room, skimmed the first page, flipped through. They were seeking $45,000 for 15 years unpaid rent, claiming I'd lived free while they bore all expenses. Attached was an affidavit from Robert Henderson, Leona's brother who lived in Salem. Detailed statement about visiting the house regularly over the years, witnessing Douglas paying for everything, repairs, utilities, property taxes, notarized signature at the bottom. I read it twice. Every sentence was fabrication. Robert barely visited, maybe twice a year for holidays. Never witnessed any transactions, but the signature was real, official. I called James. They filed a counterclaim, I said. $45,000 for rent they claim I never paid. Predictable. He didn't sound worried. What's their evidence? Affidavit from Leona's brother. Says he witnessed Douglas paying for everything over the years. The brother who doesn't live there and isn't listed on any documents we've seen? Correct. They're desperate. This is desperate people making desperate mistakes. We'll depose him, and his testimony will collapse under basic questioning. Where was he during these alleged payments? What dates? What amounts? He won't have answers because it never happened. So we're still solid? Better than solid. They've committed illegal eviction, serious violation. They've filed a frivolous counterclaim with what appears to be perjured testimony. They're not fighting back effectively. They're flailing, and every flail creates more evidence against them. I sat at the small table in my motel room that evening, laptop open, cheap model I'd bought at Walmart that afternoon, drafted a timeline for James, lockout date and time, photographs taken, recording of Douglas's threats, motel costs, accumulating, $67 per night, times 7 nights so far equaled $469. Business expenses of being wronged. I saved the document, backed it up to cloud storage. The room was small and smelled faintly of old carpet and cleaning solution, but it was temporary. Everything they'd done in the past week, the locks, the threats, the false testimony, had weakened their position, not mine. James had the emergency hearing scheduled for Monday. 5 more days. The hearing came faster than I expected. 5 days in the motel, and I was driving to the Multnomah County Courthouse Monday morning. I'd bought new clothes, suit from Target, dress shoes that pinched slightly, a tie I'd knotted 3 times before getting it right. Everything I owned was borrowed or purchased in the past week. The displacement felt physical, like wearing someone else's skin. James met me in the hallway outside the courtroom. He carried a leather briefcase, documents organized in color-coded folders. We reviewed strategy briefly, emergency eviction matter first, then preliminary hearing on the main case. Douglas and Leona arrived 20 minutes later with their attorney. His suit was cheaper than James's, fabric shiny at the elbows. Discount legal services visible in every detail. They sat on a bench 20 feet away. No one spoke. Leona whispered urgently to their lawyer. Douglas stared at the floor. The bailiff called the case number. We entered. The courtroom felt larger than necessary. High ceilings, Oregon State seal behind the judge's bench. Witness stand to the right. Gallery seating empty except for Patricia Henderson, who'd come to observe. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside James. Douglas and Leona took the defendant's table opposite. The judge was a woman in her mid-50s. Gray hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose. She reviewed papers before looking up. Mr. Morrison, you filed an emergency motion regarding alleged illegal lockout? James stood. Yes, Your Honor. While my client attended a medical appointment, defendants changed all locks, denied him access to his belongings, and threatened police involvement if he attempted to return. He presented photo exhibits, time-stamped images of the changed locks, the new doorbell camera, the inaccessible entry points, then the audio recording of Douglas's threat. Finally, the motel receipt showing $469 in costs. The judge listened, her expression growing stern. Counsel? She turned to the defense attorney. He stood awkwardly. Your Honor, this is a dispute between family members, not a formal landlord-tenant. Oregon law doesn't distinguish. The judge cut him off. Residential lockout without proper notice is illegal, family or not. Was notice provided? No, but... Then the lockout was improper. She made a note. Defendants will provide plaintiff access to retrieve personal belongings within 24 hours, supervised by a neutral party if they prefer. Defendants are also responsible for plaintiff's reasonable temporary housing costs pending resolution of the main case. Douglas and Leona exchanged glances. Their attorney nodded, defeated. After a brief recess, we returned for the preliminary hearing on the constructive trust claim. Now let's address the main petition, the judge said. Mr. Morrison, outline your client's claim. James stood again. Your Honor, in March 2010, Sylvester Bell purchased the property at 2847 Maple Street for $340,000 cash. He placed title in his son's name temporarily, intending to help him establish credit and equity, not to transfer ownership. He presented the enlarged photocopy of the original cashier's check. The document camera projected it onto the screen. My signature, the bank's routing numbers, the amount unmistakable. The judge examined the physical check closely, making notes. James continued with the maintenance binder. 15 years of receipts organized chronologically. Roof replacement, HVAC system, kitchen renovation, property taxes. Every payment from my accounts. Total exceeding $45,000. And we have a statement from the neighbor, James added. The judge read Patricia's notarized testimony aloud, key excerpts about watching me act as primary occupant and maintenance provider. The defense attorney stood. Your Honor, this was clearly a gift from father to son. Standard family arrangement. No formal gift deed is required for family transfers. 15 years of title in Mr. Douglas Bell's name establishes ownership. James responded immediately. No gift deed was ever executed. Oregon law presumes someone who pays for property retains ownership unless clear gift intent is documented. Additionally, defendants recently demanded $1,200, then $1,500 monthly rent from plaintiff. You don't charge rent to someone you believe received a gift. The judge's eyebrows raised. That's a valid point. The defense submitted Robert's affidavit. James objected instantly. Your Honor, this witness lives in Salem, wasn't present for the 2010 purchase, has no personal knowledge of these transactions. This is hearsay supporting what appears to be perjury. The judge addressed Douglas directly. Mr. Bell, did you contribute any funds toward the $340,000 purchase in 2010? Douglas hesitated. looked at his attorney. Not directly, but it was understood. Yes or no, please. No, Your Honor. Have you paid property taxes on this residence? I believe my father handled those. The roof replacement in 2018, the HVAC system in 2016. Douglas's voice quieted. No, Your Honor. The judge removed her glasses, set them on the bench. Given the substantial documentation and conflicting claims, I'm ordering forensic examination of all financial records by a court-appointed expert. The expert will verify document authenticity, trace fund sources, and establish payment timeline. Report due in 4 weeks. She looked at both tables. This is a serious matter. Constructive trust claims are complex. I need verified documentation before making any ruling. Next hearing is scheduled for June 23rd. We left the courtroom in silence. Outside on the courthouse steps, I watched Douglas and Leona argue in the parking lot with their attorney. I couldn't hear the words, but their body language was clear. Blame, fear, accusations flying between them. James stood beside me. Judge is taking this seriously. That's good for us. I watched them. 3 people fighting over a sinking ship. Douglas gestured wildly. Leona turned her back. Their attorney looked exhausted. James touched my arm. Let's get you back to your place. Tomorrow we arrange belongings retrieval. I nodded. Not my place. A motel room. But temporary. The judge's examination order meant something. Meant doubt about their story. Meant possibility. I'd been back at the motel 2 weeks. My belongings filled the small space now. Clothes in the closet, documents in a banker's box on the desk, laptop beside it. Waiting for the forensic examiner's report felt like holding breath underwater. James called mid-afternoon on a Tuesday. His voice had that urgent quality again. Sylvester, we have a problem. Douglas put the house on the market. I grabbed my laptop before he finished the sentence. He what? Listed for sale 3 days ago. $480,000. Below the appraised value for quick sale. I'm sending you the link now. The email arrived while we were talking. I clicked through to the real estate website, typed in the address. There it was, my house. Photos of rooms I'd maintained for 15 years. Description emphasizing motivated seller. Can he do that? I asked. With the case pending? Technically, yes. He's still the title holder. But we can stop it. We need to file an emergency injunction immediately. They already have 2 interested buyers. One submitted a preliminary offer. How fast can house sell? In Portland market, price below value? Maybe a week. That's why I'm calling. Can you come to my office right now? I'm drafting the motion. I left within 5 minutes. At James's office, I watched him type the emergency motion on his computer screen. Legal language forming in real time. Citation of case law, factual assertions, requested relief. If the house sells to an innocent third party before our case resolves, he explained while typing, we're in complicated territory. The new owners haven't done anything wrong. We need to freeze the sale. Now. He outlined the injunction basis. I had a legitimate pending claim. The house was disputed property. Sale would make me unable to recover even if I won, and defendants were attempting to liquidate the asset to avoid judgment. We drove to the courthouse together, arrived 30 minutes before the clerk's office closed, filed the motion with supporting documents, paid the emergency filing fee of $350. The clerk stamped the papers, said the judge would review overnight. James called me at 8 the next morning. Judge scheduled emergency hearing for 10. Same courtroom. The hearing room was smaller this time, less formal. The same judge from the previous hearing reviewed papers at her bench. Douglas and Leona sat with their attorney, all 3 looking exhausted. The real estate agent was also present, subpoenaed to attend. Their attorney argued that his clients had the right to sell their property. James countered with the pending constructive trust claim, the forensic examination in progress, how the sale would prejudice my legitimate claim. The judge asked the agent directly, "Are you aware of pending litigation regarding this property?" The agent shifted uncomfortably. "Sellers didn't disclose any litigation, Your Honor." The judge frowned. "Mr. Bell," she said to Douglas, "you listed disputed property for sale during active litigation, with a court-ordered forensic analysis underway?" "Your Honor, the property is legally titled to my client," their attorney began, "while a constructive trust claim is being examined." The judge's voice sharpened. Selling the asset before determination would moot the entire case. She ruled from the bench. Property sale is hereby enjoined pending resolution of the constructive trust claim. Mr. Morrison, file this order with the county recorder immediately. Within hours, the injunction was filed, creating an official cloud on title. The real estate agent withdrew the listing by afternoon. James reported that Douglas and Leona had left the courthouse devastated. Their attorney told him they'd planned to use sale proceeds to pay all their debts. A week later, James received a copy of the bank's foreclosure filing, public record. The bank formally notified Douglas of foreclosure proceedings on the $80,000 home equity line. He was now 5 months behind on payments, $12,000 in arrears. The notice gave him 90 days to cure the default or lose the property. Over the following days, I noticed signs of their financial collapse. Douglas's BMW was gone. Neighbor Patricia mentioned seeing a tow truck. Leona's jewelry appeared for sale on Facebook Marketplace. Their grocery shopping shifted to discount brands. I sat in my motel room one evening processing the information. They couldn't sell the house, couldn't pay their debts, couldn't afford an ongoing legal battle. Their position weakened daily while mine strengthened. James had said their financial collapse actually helped our case, showed they were desperate and reckless, reinforced the narrative of me as the responsible party. I stood by the window, watching traffic on Highway 26. Saw Douglas drive past in an old borrowed car, not his repossessed BMW. He looked haggard through the windshield. I didn't feel satisfaction, just recognition. He'd made his choices. The forensic examiner would deliver the report in 10 days. Then the final hearing would be scheduled. Douglas and Leona were drowning financially. Couldn't sell, couldn't pay, couldn't escape. The trap had closed. Not by my design, by their own desperation. The forensic examiner's report arrived on a Tuesday morning. James called before I finished my coffee. Report came in. You need to see this. Can you come to my office? I was there within the hour. James had the report printed. 47 pages with exhibits, charts, expert analysis. We sat at his conference table and read key sections together. Page 3, the examiner's conclusion. All documentation provided by plaintiff verified as authentic. No evidence of financial contribution by defendant Douglas Bell found. I kept reading. The check authenticated through Federal Reserve banking records. Signature analysis confirmed I'd signed the 2010 purchase documents. Maintenance receipts verified through contractor records and bank statement cross-references. Payment patterns showed consistent funding from my accounts for 15 years. Then the section on Robert's affidavit. The examiner had found Robert's credit card records, showing he was in Salem on 3 dates he claimed to witness payments in Portland. His employer's records confirmed he was working those days, nowhere near my house. So he lied, I said. Or Leona fed him false information, James said. Either way, it contradicts the documentary evidence. The judge will see that. The second hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. The courtroom felt familiar this time. Same judge, same tables, same formality. The forensic examiner sat in the gallery. Older man, gray beard, briefcase beside him. The judge called him to the stand. He was sworn in, stated his credentials, 30 years of forensic accounting experience, testified in over 200 cases. James walked him through the methodology, document authentication techniques, database cross-references, timeline verification, financial flow analysis. In your expert opinion, James asks, who funded the purchase of the property at 2847 Maple Street? Unquestionably, Sylvester Bell provided 100% of purchase funds and subsequent maintenance costs. The defense attorney tried attacking the methodology during cross-examination. Couldn't this check have been reimbursed later? No evidence of any reimbursement in 15 years of records, the examiner said calmly. The judge asked her own questions. Dr. Patterson, is there any scenario where the defendant's claim of ownership is supported by financial evidence? None that I could find, Your Honor. The judge took a 30-minute recess to review the full report. We waited in the hallway. Douglas and Leona huddled with their attorney, looking grim. No one spoke. Court reconvened. The judge read her preliminary ruling into the record. Based on the forensic evidence presented, this court finds that plaintiff has established a constructive trust. Defendant holds legal title, but plaintiff is the equitable owner of the property. She continued, regarding the illegal eviction matter, defendant violated Oregon residential tenancy laws. Plaintiff is awarded $12,000 in compensatory damages. Douglas stood suddenly. This isn't fair. It was my house. The judge's voice sharpened. Mr. Bell, you'll have opportunity to appeal. Sit down. He sat. Final hearing scheduled for 3 weeks to formalize transfer details and compensation amounts. We left the courtroom. I overheard the defense attorney speaking to Douglas and Leona in the hallway. You lost on the facts. Appeal will cost $15,000 minimum, and you'll lose again. Consider settlement. Leona's voice was sharp. We're not giving up. We'll appeal. Douglas nodded agreement, though uncertainty flickered across his face. I drove back to the motel that evening, sat at the small table reading the copy of the forensic report again. The word unquestionably caught my eye on page 12. I closed the report and opened my laptop. Found the photos I'd taken back in March, the original documents from my closet, the ones that started everything. 4 months ago. It felt longer. 3 more weeks, James had said. Then the final hearing. Then home. I looked around the motel room one more time. Almost over. 3 weeks passed like water through fingers. I packed my laptop and documents that morning, knowing it was the last time I'd wake up in this motel room. At the front desk, I handed the clerk my key. She smiled. Checking out for good? Yes. Finally. The final hearing was brief. The judge read her prepared ruling into the record. Detailed legal language, but the conclusion was clear. Property at 2847 Maple Street, Portland, Oregon, is determined to be held in constructive trust for plaintiff Sylvester Bell. She outlined the remedies. Defendant must execute a quitclaim deed, transferring title to plaintiff, or pay plaintiff $420,000, representing purchase price, maintenance costs, damages, and legal fees. Douglas sat silent this time, staring at the table. Leona whispered urgently to their attorney. He shook his head. No options left. After the hearing, James approached their attorney in the hallway. My client is willing to discuss reasonable settlement. We met in a courthouse conference room, 4 people around a table. James presented the terms. I would take title, pay the bank debt of $80,000, preventing foreclosure. They would vacate within 30 days. No further claims. Their attorney laid out reality. Without this, the bank forecloses in 6 days. Foreclosure destroys your credit for 7 years. You'll owe deficiency if the house doesn't cover the full debt. This is your best option. Douglas's voice was hollow. We accept. Papers were drafted and signed. The court approved the settlement. Case closed. Over the next week, I moved my belongings back gradually. Douglas and Leona moved out simultaneously. They'd found a small apartment across town. I wrote an $80,000 check to the bank, satisfying the home equity line. The bank released the lien. The title company processed the quitclaim deed. My name appeared where it belonged. Move-out day came in late August. A professional moving truck sat outside the house. Douglas and Leona carried boxes and furniture. I sat on the porch with coffee, watching. Douglas set down a box and walked to the porch. Dad, we should have... I'm sorry it came to this. I kept my voice steady. You demanded my pension, changed the locks. Tried to sell what wasn't yours. Pay for your choices. He nodded slowly and returned to the truck. No more words passed between us. The truck loaded. Douglas and Leona sat in their old sedan, replacement for the repossessed BMW. The engine started. They drove away. I watched until the taillights disappeared around the corner. I stood and walked through the front door. My house. I walked room to room. Living room where they'd presented their rent demands. Kitchen where they'd itemized my food costs. Upstairs to the bedroom they'd tried to relocate me from. Everything felt different now. Earned through evidence and law, not given through generosity. I made coffee in the kitchen. The same kitchen where Douglas had threatened eviction. Poured a cup, added cream the way I liked it. Carried it to the back porch. The August sun was warm. Birds moved through the trees in the yard. The sound of my own house, peaceful. No arguments threading through the walls. No demands sliding across tables. Just quiet ownership. I thought about calling Patricia to let her know I was home. thought about calling James to thank him properly, but instead I just sat. The quiet was enough. 4 months of documentation, courtrooms, motel rooms, and strategic patience. 4 months to reclaim what had always been mine. I sipped the coffee. It had grown lukewarm, but I didn't mind. Douglas and Leona were somewhere across town, living with consequences. The house was mine, legally now, matching the equity I'd held all along. Justice, when it finally arrived, hadn't announced itself with fanfare. It settled like evening, gradual, inevitable right. The sun dropped lower, casting long shadows across the yard. My house, my life, reclaimed. I'd lived 67 years, and somewhere in there learned that justice isn't about revenge, it's about restoration. They were gone. I was home. That was enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.